There are lies. There are big lies. And then there's Dana White, a man who lies with the confidence of someone who thinks no one on earth has access to Google. Recently, bald father of the Octagon made 2 podcast appearances, and somehow each one came with new DLC. Dana White's Lore Expansion Pack, Francis Ngannou Edition. And my God, these stories are so wild they make Fast and Furious plots look realistic.
According to Dana White, Francis Ngannou wasn't just a difficult fighter negotiating for better pay. No. He was apparently the UFC's final boss, a one-man riot squad roaming the Performance Institute like a heavyweight boogeyman. The way Dana tells it, Francis didn't simply voice concerns or push back on pay. He went full WWE. One minute, he's minding his own business after a press conference. The next, he's materializing in front of Dana in a dark hallway, grabbing him by the shirt, dragging him back into an office, and delivering villain dialogue like he's auditioning for a Bond movie. Dana claims Francis, who in public speaks with the calmness of a monk and the politeness of a man raised by nuns, leaned in and said, "After I knock out Stipe, you're gonna book me a private plane to Paris." A private plane to Paris. As if Francis was a cartoon mob boss collecting extortion payments. And somehow, in Dana's story, Francis didn't whisper this or joke about it. He commanded it with perfect English, flawless grammar, and the confidence of a man with a 401k in intimidation. The irony? Dana spent years telling the world Francis could barely speak the language. But in this magical flashback, Francis suddenly speaks like a Harvard lecturer while simultaneously acting like a nightclub bouncer who's had enough for the night. Even funnier is the timing. These events supposedly took place nearly a decade ago, 10 years. Through all the contract disputes, all the public interviews, all the bitter UFC vs Francis drama, Dana somehow kept this story locked away like a sacred prophecy. Not one mention of "he grabbed me" during years of trash-talking Francis for leaving. Not once during the PFL deal meltdown, the boxing crossover, or the heated headlines. Only now, while sitting comfortably on a podcast couch, do these superhero-level assault stories magically appear. Sorry to interrupt, bro, but I truly want to hear your opinion. If our content feels good to you, please comment your thoughts. We're facing low subscriptions lately, and your support means the world. Please subscribe so we can continue this journey together. And the best part? Dana expects us to believe he shrugged it off. Imagine that. The UFC's CEO, whose ego is strong enough to drag an entire media cycle by itself, gets manhandled twice by the scariest heavyweight alive. And his reaction is basically, "Oh well, go fight Stipe next." No security, no cameras, no consequences, no firing, just vibes. This is the same Dana who fired Dan Hardy on the spot for yelling at an employee. The same Dana who blasted fighters publicly for refusing fights, missing weight, asking for more money, or even blinking the wrong way. But Francis allegedly went full Mortal Kombat on 2 executives, and Dana responds with a promotion and a title shot. Absolutely no sense, zero logic, peak fiction. And let's not ignore the storytelling voice Dana used. This low, eerie, whispery tone he only pulls out when he's very clearly making things up on the spot. It's the exact voice he used during his legendary "we're tapping the illegal streamer's phone" monologue. The voice of a man inventing scenes in real time, like a storyteller who keeps adding details to distract you from the fact that nothing he's saying is real. So here we are, expected to believe that Francis Ngannou, who has always been reserved, respectful, and soft-spoken, was secretly a backstage menace for years, assaulting executives and demanding private aircraft like a Bond villain cosplayer. Meanwhile, not a single camera angle, not a single witness, not a single leaked text, not a single disciplinary hearing, and not a single prior mention supports it. In Dana's universe, this isn't a contradiction. This is Tuesday. If Dana White's first story about Francis Ngannou sounded like a deleted scene from a bad action movie, then the private jet prophecy is the sequel nobody asked for. According to Dana, the moment Francis stepped off his stage after a press conference, he didn't just talk business. He transformed into a full-blown Bond villain, demanding luxury aircraft, like he was owed tribute for sparing the planet. Picture the scene exactly as Dana narrates it. The two are walking down a quiet hallway, probably lit like a crime documentary, when Francis suddenly materializes beside him like a heavyweight phantom. No hello, no small talk, no how's the family. Just a dramatic grab of the arm, the kind of move you'd expect before a plot twist. And then the line, "When I win, you're going to book me a private plane to Paris." Not, "Could we discuss travel?" Not, "Is there a chance I could get assistance?" No, a full command, dripping with cinematic menace, as if Francis was moments away from revealing a secret lair under the Las Vegas desert. And somehow, Dana wants us to believe that Francis, who has always been diplomatic, composed, and almost painfully polite, was out here making mafia-style demands for luxury jets while speaking flawless English. Because apparently, in Dana's retroactive storytelling, Francis only pretends not to know English. But in this magical flashback, suddenly the man speaks like he grew up reciting Shakespeare. Dana even claims he laughed at Francis, because nothing says dominant UFC president like giggling nervously while your heavyweight star threatens to hold your travel department hostage. Then, in this legendary tale, Francis walks off into the shadows, fully confident he's about to obliterate Stipe Miocic and claim his private Parisian aircraft. The prophecy has been spoken. The jet shall be summoned. The heavyweight king will fly home like royalty. Except, reality happened. Stipe beat the brakes off Francis. Beat him so badly that even Dana says it twice in the same sentence. The private jet prophecy evaporated instantly, and Dana, in hindsight, claims this was the moment he should have cut him. Right, because that's when Dana finally draws the line. Not assault, not office shoving, not PI hallway intimidation, but because Francis asked for a jet that Dana claims he would never actually give anyone despite handing out favors like Halloween candy to his favors? Let's be honest, the timeline doesn't make sense, the details don't line up, and the story itself has the structure of something someone invents while buying time on a podcast. The kind of story where you can practically feel the improvisation as Dana scrambles to stitch the plot together on the fly. And the funniest part is that he only brought it up now, nearly a decade later, during a time when Francis has finally escaped the UFC orbit and proven he can make millions without Dana's permission. Convenient timing, right? This private jet story wasn't a revelation. It was damage control wrapped in a bedtime story. A tale designed to paint Francis as entitled, arrogant, ungrateful. All the things Dana needs the public to believe to justify why Francis walked away and still won. Because the truth is simple. Francis made more money, gained more freedom, and exposed the UFC's pay structure by succeeding outside Dana's control. And nothing triggers Dana White harder than a fighter proving they don't need him. So, the private jet prophecy lives on. Not as truth, not as history, but as one of Dana's favorite genres. Retroactive fantasy storytelling, TM. Now let's slow down, take a breath, and step into a little place I like to call reality. A dimension Dana White seems to visit only on weekends. Because for these stories to be true, for even a fraction of Dana's Nanu fanfiction to check out, you'd have to believe in a world where common sense took a permanent vacation. Let's start with the basics. If Francis Ngannou, the most terrifying heavyweight to ever lace up MMA gloves, actually grabbed Dana White by the shirt, shoved him into an office, and barked orders at him like some kind of rent-a-mob boss, there would be consequences. Real consequences. Not imaginary podcast-approved consequences. Not, I should have cut him, but didn't because reason. Actual, career-altering fallout. Because this isn't happening in a broom closet behind a gas station. This is the UFC Performance Institute, a building that is basically the Pentagon of MMA. Cameras everywhere, staff everywhere, fighters everywhere, security everywhere. You cannot sneeze in that building without 6 people reviewing the footage. And yet, we're supposed to believe Francis channeled his inner Thanos, committed workplace assault on multiple executives, and somehow, not one recording exists, not one phone video, not one leak, not one anonymous report, not one intern whispering on Reddit, nothing. Meanwhile, Dan Hardy raised his voice once, and got fired so fast his badge probably deactivated mid-sentence. But Francis, according to Dana's storytelling, Francis threw him around like a scene from a Netflix action show, and the UFC responded by giving him title shots, promotional pushes, and contract offers the size of a small nation's GDP. Totally believable. Absolutely airtight. Then there's the timing. These events supposedly took place nearly a decade ago, 10 years. And Dana, who never misses a chance to bury a fighter publicly, especially one who leaves on bad terms, somehow kept this story locked away inside the vault like it was national security information. Only now, conveniently, when Francis is rich, successful, untouchable, and outside UFC jurisdiction, does Dana remember these backstage brawls. And we're supposed to believe that? We're supposed to buy that the guy who publicly blasted fighters for missing weight, criticized champions for not wanting to fight, and threw entire divisions under the bus without blinking, suddenly decided to keep quiet about being assaulted by his own heavyweight star. Come on. Dana's memory works like a streaming service, selective, glitchy, and suddenly updated whenever a podcast mic appears. And then there's the logic gap of all logic gaps. Dana claims he was ready to cut Francis over a private jet request, but not over physical assault. So, a luxury flight is where he draws the moral line, but getting shoved across an office is fine. UFC employment policy, according to Dana, is apparently assault an executive, promotion, ask for a plane, termination. Make it make sense. The truth is painfully obvious. None of these stories happen. Not like Dana says, not when Dana says. Maybe not at all. They're improvised monologues, stitched together mid-interview, delivered in that same weird, low, dramatic voice he uses every time he invents a new villain origin story. And why now? Simple. Because Francis left. Because Francis bet on himself. Because Francis made independent money. Real money. Without permission. Francis exposed something Dana cannot stand. A fighter proving the UFC isn't the only path to success. So, Dana did what Dana does best. He rewrote the past, recast Francis as the bad guy, and handed the media a script only the extremely gullible would believe. This isn't truth. This isn't history. This is damage control, disguised as storytelling. Dana White's denial of Dana White privilege might be the funniest thing he's ever said. And this is a man who once claimed he was wiretapping streamers like some bald FBI agent. The whole segment feels less like an interview and more like a comedy special, where the headliner happens to be the UFC president insisting the sky isn't blue while standing under it. Dana goes on these podcasts, sits back, crosses his arms, and with full confidence says the phrase doesn't exist, mere seconds before describing it in perfect detail. It's almost poetic. He explains that certain fighters, the ones the UFC believes in, get propped up. They get better placements, better opportunities, better matchmaking, better promotion. Dana delivers this explanation without realizing he's literally giving the dictionary definition of favoritism. He might as well have said, "We don't play favorites. We just give some fighters easier paths and massive marketing pushes because we like them more." The mental gymnastics on display could qualify for a gold medal. Let's look at the examples. Sean O'Malley spent years punching NPC-level opponents, while the UFC painted him as the second coming of McGregor. Chandler got a title shot after beating Dan Hooker, who was coming off a loss. Colby Covington racks up title shots like they're buy one, get one free coupons, despite barely fighting top contenders. Meanwhile, more deserving fighters, real killers, actual contenders, get treated like background characters in their own sport. Merab had to win 9 fights before getting a sniff at gold. Tony Ferguson practically became a mythic figure after 12 straight wins with no real title shot. Yoel Romero fought like a Marvel superhero for 8 wins before getting an interim title. Junior Dos Santos had to pile up 7 victories, which is basically a lifetime in heavyweight years. Yet somehow, Dana wants us to believe the system is fair. He wants us to believe it's merit-based. He wants us to believe the UFC just happens to give certain fighters red carpet treatment out of sheer coincidence. Conor and Ronda, Dana claims they didn't get privilege because they were stars. But stars aren't born. They're marketed. They're polished. They're given the corporate megaphone. Dana didn't discover a couple of gems. He minted them, molded them, and launched them with billions in UFC machinery behind them. And to be fair, both would have succeeded anyway, but their rise was jet-fueled by a system designed to pick favorites. But what about Bo Nickal? The man could have 4 fights in the UFC and still somehow land on massive PPV main cards ahead of actual champions, just because the UFC wants him to be a star. He's had one tough opponent, got destroyed, and yet the UFC is still desperately trying to cosplay him into a future superstar. This isn't about merit. This is about investment, marketing, strategy, money. That's Dana White privilege in a nutshell, whether Dana wants to admit it or not. And that's the joke. Dana White privilege isn't some mythical conspiracy theory. It's not even subtle. It's a business model, a very real, very obvious, very predictable pattern in the UFC's genetic code. Dana knows it, fighters know it, fans know it, even the commentators know it. They just have to pretend they don't. Anytime Dana denies it, he comes across like someone insisting the UFC doesn't sell merch while standing in front of a giant Reebok display. So when Dana leans forward during a podcast and says, "That's not privilege, that's just fight promotion," all you can really do is nod, smile, and appreciate the comedy of it all. Because in trying to deny Dana White privilege, he actually delivers the clearest proof that it exists. Said Strikeforce wouldn't shut down, shut it down. Said Reebok deal would be amazing, fighters made 10 cents. Said DJ was lying about negotiations, turns out Dana was lying. Says fighters don't want to fight, magically changes once they speak publicly. Says Francis is a bad guy after Francis embarrasses him financially by leaving. Dana lies so much, he should have a loyalty card at this point. Buy 10 lies, get the next one free. If Dana White ever stopped running the UFC, he could walk straight into a full-time career as a fiction author because the man's lie resume is longer than most fighters' win streaks. And these aren't small fibs or innocent exaggerations. No, Dana lies with the confidence of someone who assumes the public has the memory of a goldfish and the curiosity of a houseplant. He lies like he's speedrunning it. He lies like it's cardio. He lies because frankly he can, or at least he thinks he can. Take the Strikeforce situation. Back when the UFC acquired Strikeforce, Dana swore up and down that the organization would continue running as its own entity. "We're keeping it alive," he said. "We're not gonna shut it down," he said. Fast forward, and the entire thing was absorbed, dismantled, and quietly tossed into the corporate furnace like a forgotten branch office. It didn't even get a proper funeral, just a slow fade to black while Dana pretended nothing happened. Then there's the legendary Reebok deal. Dana pitched it to fighters as a revolutionary moment, a game changer, a financial blessing, a system that would finally bring stability to athlete pay. What fighters actually got was a collection of standardized kits, a bunch of lost sponsorship money, and uniforms so bland they made prison outfits look expressive. Despite the backlash, Dana stood in front of cameras, smiling like he just gifted everyone a free Tesla. Meanwhile, fighters were out here losing six-figure sponsorship deals and getting paid in Reebok socks. And let's not forget the classic, Fighter X doesn't want to fight. This is Dana's favorite trick, the go-to PR move. Every time a fighter asks for fair pay, better terms, or even an ounce of respect, suddenly they don't want to fight. Magically, as soon as the fighter speaks publicly, a completely different story appears. Dana talks as though he's translating a language only he understands. "They don't want it," he says. Then the fighter tweets, "I literally begged for this fight. It has happened so many times that fans can spot the pattern before Dana even opens his mouth." And then we have the Demetrius Johnson saga, a masterclass in misinformation. During DJ's reign as one of the most dominant champions in MMA history, Dana constantly painted him as hard to work with, uninterested, difficult, or unwilling to take risks. Years later, the truth came out. Johnson had been pushing for big fights, pushing for fair pay, pushing for opportunities, and Dana simply wasn't listening. Instead, he villainized one of the most humble and respectful fighters on earth because it made for an easier narrative. The list goes on like a highlight reel of corporate gaslighting. Dana says one thing in 2015, the complete opposite in 2018, and then a brand new fabricated version in 2024. Every contradiction gets smoothed over by the same charisma-powered confidence. It's almost impressive, if it weren't so exhausting. At this point, Dana could stand in the octagon, point at a blue corner stool, call it red, and still deliver the speech like he's unveiling the cure for cancer. That is Dana's live resume in a nutshell. Bold, consistent, shameless, and sprinkled across decades of press conferences, scrums, interviews, and podcasts. And if history has taught us anything, it's that every time Dana goes on air to share a sensational new story about a fighter, especially one who left and succeeded without him, the truth is probably hiding somewhere very far away. The PFL chapter of this saga is where things get interesting, because for once, this isn't a simple Dana bad, fighter good scenario. No, this is one of those rare moments in combat sports where everyone manages to be wrong at the same time. A beautiful disaster, a double KO of accountability, a split draw of blame. Because on one hand, you have Francis Ngannou making the boldest, loudest, most seismic exit in UFC history. He gambled on himself, walked away from the most powerful promotion in MMA, and signed with the PFL on terms so luxurious they sounded like something out of a billionaire's wish list. He wasn't just a fighter. PFL made him an executive. He wasn't just being paid, he was being rewarded. He wasn't just working, he was practically running the place. And what did they get in return? Silence, dust, cobwebs on the contract. A heavyweight champion who fought as often as a solar eclipse. Francis secured the bag, secured the title, secured the boardroom, and then secured a long vacation. If you're running a business and you handed a fighter that much money, power, and public visibility, you'd expect at least a little activity. One fight, a teaser, a hint, anything. But instead, Francis delivered a masterclass in selective participation. From a pure business standpoint, yeah, it felt like he scammed them. Not illegally, not immorally, but strategically. He played the system like a master, took the deal of the decade, and barely stepped into the cage afterward. PFL definitely didn't sign up for that. But here's the twist. Just because Francis finessed PFL doesn't suddenly make Dana White the beacon of truth. In fact, Dana using the PFL situation as a weapon to validate his Francis is a bad guy narrative is peak hypocrisy. Dana isn't criticizing Francis out of moral principle. He's bitter. Bitter that Francis left, bitter that Francis succeeded, bitter that Francis generated more money and more freedom without him, bitter that the entire world got to watch a fighter walk away from the UFC and instantly prove that the grass isn't just greener, it's practically glowing neon green with dollar signs growing out of the soil. Two things can be true at the same time. Francis played the PFL strategically and gave them less than they paid for. Dana White is still lying and rewriting history because Francis embarrassed him. Those truths don't cancel each other out. They coexist, they overlap, and they create the perfect storm of messy MMA politics. Francis may have misled PFL about how active he'd be, but Dana turning that into Francis is a terrible person who assaulted me once in a hallway is such an extreme leap in logic that it belongs in the Olympic long jump. This whole situation is just one giant mirror. PFL is learning the hard way that big dreams come with big risks. Francis is learning that being a boss is harder than it looks. Dana is learning that fighters with independence are his kryptonite. Everyone took an L here, just not the same kind of L. Francis lost credibility with some fans. PFL lost money and momentum. Dana lost the narrative, which is the only thing he ever cared about. And that's why this chapter stands out. It's not about heroes and villains, it's about flawed people in a flawed system, all trying to claim victory while ignoring the parts they messed up themselves. Francis? Yeah, he scammed PFL. Let's be honest. Massive money, executive role, 0 fights. But Dana telling fairy tales to cover the embarrassment that Francis left, made more money, and exposed the UFC fighter pay structure, also transparent. Two things can be true at once. Francis scammed PFL, Dana is lying about Francis. The universe contains multitudes. At the end of the day, Dana White says, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. We did. Francis showed he was smart enough to bet on himself. Sorry to interrupt, bro, but I truly want to hear your opinion. If our content feels good to you, please comment your thoughts. We're facing low subscriptions lately, and your support means the world. Please subscribe so we can continue this journey together. Dana showed he lies like he breathes. Simple. If Francis really assaulted 2 executives and demanded jets, there would have been footage witnesses, paperwork, public fallout. Instead, we got silence for a decade, random podcast stories, weird voiceovers, improvisation-level acting. Until evidence appears, these stories stay right where they belong, in the Dana White cinematic universe, a series of fictional tales written by the man himself. So yeah, that's the video. What do you think? Did Francis actually grab Dana like a discount action movie henchman? Or is this just another episode of Ball Man Lies into a microphone? Let me know. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.